Hi, everybody. I'm here today with Georgie Collinson, one of Australia's top anxiety therapists and specializing in hypnotherapy and a bunch of other cool modalities that we'll talk about on our chat today. We invited Georgie on for a continuation of the Mental Health Awareness Month in October. Although we're kind of rounding out October here, but we're gonna squeeze one more in before the month closes out, and I don't see any reason to stop. So I think that we've had some great videos so far, which our community is going to see. And Georgie, thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to the call.
Thank you so much for having me and squeezing me into the end of the month.
I know it's right. We're recording this on October 29th, 2024, so it's perfect timing. Now you're in Australia. Tell us about kind of your path and how you got to Australia and how you got into anxiety therapy.
Well, I was born and bred in Melbourne, Australia,
Okay.
so it's like
So you
my
didn't have much to do about it. Yeah,
it was just where my soul chose to land in this lifetime.
sure.
But I have done quite a lot of travel as well up until recently. So I was sort of based in Portugal for a while and then Bali in Indonesia. So some beautiful, different journeys in different places, which is always fascinating. But yeah, that's kind of now I'm living in Byron Bay, which has been a journey because it's not where I was born, but I just kind of like packed up my car and my cat one day and I was sick of the travel and the moving around as much as that digital nomad life was exciting. One day I was just sick of it and I wanted like a home and a base and a place to land. So I chose Byron and here we are now.
I haven't been out to Byron yet. As many people in the community might know, Lindsay's living in Byron Bay as our co-owner of Retreat Finder. And from what I understand, Byron Bay is a bit of like the spiritual wellness capital of at least the east coast of Australia, or if not the whole country. Is it like kind of like the San Francisco of Australia? Is that the vibe?
Definitely. Definitely. I would say there are certain like hubs in the world that have a similar vibe about them. I'd say like Costa Rica is one of them and Mexico and then Bali, all sort of, and even Lisbon in Portugal has a sort of similar kind of vibe of people who are just more open minded and perhaps more conscious. And then in Australia, if you're choosing one place, it's Byron Bay for sure.
All right, we're gonna have to do site visits. I'm gonna have to fly out to Australia and do a whole tour of Byron Bay and show everybody the cool spots.
It will blow your mind. I just every day I drive around here and I just look at the green and it's the flowers. It's so bright. It's so beautiful. It just
And it's
it's
opposite seasons. So for North Americans, it might seem daunting to go to Australia if you're not used to it, but it's a great sort of snowbird thing to do because the opposite seasons for the hemispheres. So, like I said, October, we're recording this in October. I'm living in the Pacific Northwest of North America. So it's dreary and rainy and getting cold, and everybody's got their Gore-Tex jackets out. And Lindsay, who's in Byron Bay, is now going into the tank tops and the halter tops and getting into like cute spring and summer stuff. So I'm like, next winter, maybe I might go out to Australia for a couple months
it's
and
such
have
a
a
good
business
escape.
reason to get out there.
Yeah, a great escape from winter for sure.
Amazing. Okay, let's get back into business. So you've got a program called the Anxiety Reset Method. Can you tell us about the background of that and kind of who it's for and how it works?
Yeah, so well, this is a method I developed a few years ago, and I've now it's a book that was released last year, and has been, we had it published in Australia and the US, which was so cool. The anxiety reset method is essentially a formula looking at, okay, like this anxiety that we experience, it's not just going up in our head. Like there's not just the thoughts going on there. It's so many facets to it that we can explore. And if we just take a moment to think about the world we live in and the environment we live in, it's basically set up to produce anxiety in so many ways. We've got information overload. We're getting news stories, horrific events from overseas that, are so far away that we can do nothing about, generate a sense of helplessness, essentially, that go back a couple hundred years, you only had to deal with the problems generally that were like in front of your face in your community, and now we're so aware of every problem that's going on in the world. It's quite daunting and overwhelming. And of course, we've got a lack of community these days, much less face to face interaction with other human beings, eye contact. Like we are lacking our need for connection in so many ways. We've got financial stress. We've got no one's got enough time. We're always like everything's so fast. I don't think I have to go on to sort of give you the picture. We all know that there are so many factors. So it's no surprise so many of us are feeling anxiety and experiencing this. And so my anxiety reset method is about looking at how can we firstly build our sense of resilience to all these stresses around us so that we're not as impacted by them, and also of course address that root cause and really look at, I'm a naturopath as well, and naturopaths love looking for, okay, what is the thing that's underlying all of these symptoms? If you have a headache, it's not just, okay, we'll give you pain medication for your head. We've got some causes for the headache. Maybe it's dehydration, maybe it's some kind of food intolerance. So this is what we can do with anxiety as well. We can look at what's actually behind it. And again, a huge part of my work is exploring the subconscious mind, working with the inner child and figuring out where all this programming that set us up for fear and doubting ourselves and all the patterns that sort of characterize especially high functioning anxiety, where all of that came from, so we can address it and we can resolve it, which is
Okay, what
pretty
does that
amazing.
mean? What does high functioning anxiety mean? How does somebody, what are the symptoms? How does somebody know if they're experiencing? I mean, I feel like we all experience stress to a degree. So how do we know when something is just regular day-to-day stress versus anxiety? And then how do you distinguish high functioning anxiety from, I guess, dysfunctional anxiety, where you kind of like laid out in bed and you can't get out of bed and you're just not capable of kind of coping?
Yeah, when we're like not able to leave the house kind of scenario, that's where we're moving more into a low functioning anxiety. But I suppose these days there's a bit more of a blurry line with that because people can work from home so they can still be functioning, but they're not leaving their house. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, but I would say so. There's definitely gray area with this, but as a like rule of thumb, we would say that general day to day stress is more connected to an obvious deadline that you might have. So maybe, I've just written my second book. So, like, writing that book to the deadline created a bit of stress for me in the last couple of weeks. It was like, oh, like maybe I'll stay up a bit later and my heart's racing a
Yeah.
bit faster.
Yeah.
But once I submitted that manuscript, it was like, okay, everything went back to baseline and my body could kind of recover, and I made some space to rest and recover from that. So that would be our sort of like stress of life that can happen. We can see a clear correlation with what's kind of causing that, and often it's useful. It helps us to function, to think, to formulate sentences. Right now, you and I having this conversation, we need a bit of stress. If we were both just super chill and relaxed right now, we wouldn't be saying anything interesting. So we need our brains to function really well, and that some stress temporarily can do that. But when we're not seeing that resolution to our stress, and it's like, okay, I handed in the manuscript, the deadline's done, but oh no, what's the next thing? And then we're worried about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that worry is pervasive and persistent. That's where we're moving into the territory of anxiety. And I define high functioning anxiety as typically it's kind of like all our day-to-day tasks are well accomplished and we can get through all of that stuff, but we do have this persistent worry. Typically we are a high achiever, so there's a sense of outsourcing that validation, that self-worth from achieving, and it kind of is our way of coping and making ourselves feel a false sense of safety. If I
Mm.
get the award, if I get the salary, if I buy the house, if I have the car, I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm good enough, finally. But of course, that's just a rabbit hole that we end up falling down, and it never ends as well, trying to
So how
find
do
out.
I know if I'm a high functioning person, and I've known people like this, and I do it myself to an extent, is I use anxiety or stress to sort of surf the wave of energy to help me get stuff done. How do I know when it's no longer healthy and productive? How do I know, like, what are some signs where it's like, okay, maybe this is a little too much, maybe I need to scale back and start addressing some of the underlying anxiety issues around this?
I would say most often our body will tell us. So we'll get some kind of symptom coming up. Often we might see it in our gut health. So we might have some kind of chronic gut condition. Often people call it IBS, but there is so much more emotional stuff behind IBS that is typically responsible for it. You might get as women typically will see changes in their cycles and hormone symptoms. So
Mm.
maybe painful periods or irregular periods, for example.
Inconsistent cycles, yeah.
that's it. Or maybe we'll be heading towards burnout and we can see that it's just not sustainable anymore. Or we're not sleeping right. Or, it's all becoming too much. So it tends to be a incremental increase over time where at the start it feels like this is helpful for me and it's serving me. And Amir, if you're aware of those riding those waves and also taking care of yourself at the same time and doing things to balance it out, it's a different scenario. But so many people, we just have this push 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 mentality and we never give ourselves space to recharge, whereas some of us do naturally know how to sort of meet our needs and, okay, I'm going to let myself have a sleep in today, or it's time for a holiday or a vacation, whatever we call it. So it's like so many of us are not giving ourselves that, and we're starting to experience the effects of it, and it will usually be after years and years of living in this way. And people tend to come to me when it's like a rock bottom moment, or it feels like I can't actually keep going like this. Maybe they're yelling at their kids a lot. Maybe they're noticing, oh, I don't like the kind of person I am because of the stress, or they're having trouble with their partner as well. And it's really getting to this breaking point of something has to change here.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the symptoms is that I can get acidic. I can get acid reflux quite a bit if my anxiety levels are too high. And then sometimes there are physical symptoms where I might pull my back or I just
Mm.
get aches and pains. And then also lack of sleep, restlessness. And then the lack of sleep then translates into, like, I'm someone who's always been quite communicative and articulate all my life. I've been able to explain concepts quite well. But if I notice myself having like struggling to get a concept out or formulating a concept and articulating it, that's one of my telltale signs. Like, hey, your brain's not functioning at 100%. You need to like take your foot off the gas a little bit and go rest. And then, or just straight up exhaustion. Sometimes, like a couple times, hopefully it's not too often, I'll just wake up and I cannot get the engine going no matter what I do. Coffee, caffeine, whatever the caffeine, whatever the regimen is, isn't working anymore. And I'm like, okay, I got to cancel all my appointments today and just take a rest day. So hopefully we can catch these signs a little bit earlier and not drive ourselves to exhaustion.
But Amir, that's amazing that you have that within you, to say the love for yourself within you, to say I'm going to clear the schedule and give myself a rest day, because I can't tell you the amount of almost like debates I get into with clients where they're like so sick, maybe they have a cold or something, and their body is trying to tell them like you need a day off work or 2 days off work, and they just, even though they can ask for that, even though they've got sick leave, even though it's available to them, they can't bring themselves to ask for it because it feels like I'm failing or I'm not living up to some kind of standard. And the reality is we're not robots. Like we can't just keep going, going, going. We are human beings, and we're not designed to constantly work.
Yeah, and especially as a business owner, as an employee, I think you have perhaps a few more outs. You have people that can cover for you. As a business owner, I have my business partner that can cover for me to an extent, but in order to clear my day, I need to cancel meetings with people that have been expecting this meeting, whether it's from a sales perspective or a client customer service perspective or whatever. Sometimes it's just necessary because the Amir you're going to get is going to be a shadow of his real self. So it's not going to be super productive, anyways. So I might as well get myself into a better place so that I can give more. And most of the time, people are quite understanding. It's like, hey, I need a day.
Yeah. 100%. Imagine if like everyone felt safe enough to sort of like do that. We would have a much healthier society, I'm sure. But when a lot of people are feeling that exhaustion, like you mentioned, what will we do? We'll tend to double up on the coffee and the caffeine and we'll try and push through. And we do have a chronically sleep deprived and exhausted society in many ways. So it seems so normal. What I'm describing with this high functioning anxiety, we're like, hang on a second, that sounds like 20 people I know. Well, it is all around us, but just because it's common doesn't mean that it's healthy. And we all enforce it with each other. So I've, over the years, I've shifted the kind of people I hang out with. Like that's one of the reasons I live in Byron Bay. There's a different energy around me which helps me also connect with what my values are and the way that I want to be living too.
Yeah, I mean, we started the conversation with you referencing resilience. So I guess resilience and ability to handle and the capacity to handle more is part of it. And also having the awareness of identifying the early warning signs and having the tool set to address it before it gets to exhaustion. So could you speak a little bit first about the resilience piece of it and what that means in the context of your work?
Yeah, so I have a concept called the resilience shield, which, so if you can visualize a shield, in my book, it's like you can see the nine components of this shield, but I'll just go through them briefly to give you a bit of a picture and an
Sure.
overview. So, firstly, one of the key ones is our gut health, actually, which is interesting. You
So wait,
said you
hold
get
on. The 9 points, are they like 9 points of a shield image?
they
What's the
go around
visual?
they go around the outside of the shield, sort of like these,
Okay,
that it's all formulating this shield. So when
got
one
it.
of those nine components is down, or several of them at once, it gives us a bit of a roadmap of, oh, hang on, yes, that, look at all the holes in my shield, I can go patch those up now. There's a clear way that you can improve your circumstance no matter what life's throwing at you. So it could be like sleep is one of them. Okay, well, yeah, I've only been getting 5 hours of sleep a night for the last week. That's a clear place that we need to go. And if you are sleep deprived, your chances of experiencing anxiety are much higher. We kind of go into this hypervigilance when we're sleep deprived. So that's one of the key ones. But you also mentioned that you get reflux, and that's one of your signs that, or this like
Yeah,
acid kind of coming up. Now,
yeah.
one of the reasons for that is because when we're in a more chronic fight or flight response, or our sympathetic nervous system state, that's where we're more stressed and we're more in that anxious state. Now all the blood flow is diverted away from our digestive system and to our limbs so that we can kind of essentially fight something or run away in an emergency scenario. So our whole digestive system kind of shuts down. So Amir, you might be going along your life, and after a while of being in that state, or more chronically in that state, you're going to be eating food, but the digestive system's kind of asleep as you're putting food in it. So that means we're getting actually less stomach acid production and less digestive juices to send everything down. So it kind of sits, the food sits up in your gut and it doesn't kind of go down properly. But if we
So
can,
it's undigested, remains undigested for longer.
yes, and we often think that it means we've got too much acid, but really it's because there's not enough acid and not enough movement in the digestive system to keep the food moving through. So it sits there and it's coated in acid, so it
Wait, hold
tastes,
on. What? If I'm having acid reflux, it could be a symptom of having not enough acid because the
yes,
food isn't getting digested and moving through the system.
that's it. So it
So it
will,
just sort of percolates on top.
yes, and so the food's going to be coated in some acid, right? So you're going to feel that
Hmm.
and you're going to be like, oh, too much acid, but it's actually not too much. It's because there's not enough. And so there are ways that we can stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system, or our rest and digest mode, to, I call it like our anxiety off switch, which we can weave these techniques through our day-to-day life, which is really nice, even in those stressful periods. Things like taking a little shot of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, they both work the same. You have to dilute the apple cider vinegar. So if you had a shot glass, it would be 1/3 apple cider vinegar, 2/3 water, so that it's not too intense. Otherwise,
Says
you may,
you. I like it intense. I like it pure. I
if
like
you
my
have it,
vinegar like by the spoonful.
if you have it pure, you might make yourself feel a bit nauseous. So just,
Okay.
Amir, maybe your stomach can handle it, but everyone listening, I would highly recommend you dilute it. But when you have it before you eat that meal, say 10-15 minutes before, you're going to give your digestive system enough time to actually switch on to then eat lunch. And then by the time you actually put food in your stomach, your body's ready for it. It's gone, okay, we're going to like release some hydrochloric acid right now. We're going to release some digestive enzymes. We're going to get that motor complex moving so that the muscles are kind of moving through your
Oh,
body.
so you're saying as a
Otherwise,
regular practice, you take
yeah,
a spoonful or a shot of the vinegar diluted in water 10, 15 minutes before your meal.
that's it. And you'll counteract the effect of you having just gotten off like a stressful work meeting and then it's time for lunch.
Hmm.
You're going to help your body transition into, okay, now it's time to eat. And you can do this for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I recommend it a lot for people with breakfast in the morning because that's when we typically have heightened anxiety. We get that shot of cortisol, that rise of cortisol in the morning. And so it's a nice way to taper that off as well and actually make us hungry for breakfast too. So many people skip breakfast because they think I'm just not a breakfast person or I'm not hungry, when in fact there's stress and anxiety that's switching off the digestive system at that time. So it's if we were actually relaxed in the morning, we would be hungry for breakfast.
So if I'm in an anxious state chronically, my digestive system is at a lower functioning mode because my system thinks that it's time to fight or run. And so, therefore, if my digestive system is at a lower functioning mode and I continue to consume the same amount of food and calories, it's going to remain undigested. So,
It's gonna be harder for your gut to digest it. So we can help it, right? Another way you could do that is like taking 3 deep breaths or just saying to your body first, like before, sometimes we just sort of shove the food in our mouths as well. We don't even think about it. So it's like, I am eating food right now and thinking about it for a moment because you'll notice you'll start to salivate. If you think about eating like a delicious, I don't know, if you're actually hungry and you think about eating like a delicious burger or something, you will
okay,
start
I got
to,
it. It's
yeah,
happening right here.
there it is, because that's the cephalic phase of digestion. Our brain has to acknowledge that there's food first to then, again, it's helping our body to prepare for digestion. So there's lots of different things we can do. And then you can see how over time, if you were weaving that into your lifestyle rather than not doing any of that stuff, you're much less likely to get these chronic gut issues, which then flow into other areas of your life.
So, I never realized the importance of gut health and gut issues on managing anxiety levels. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's a mechanism for managing anxiety in your life and building resiliency.
Yes. And you might have heard of the vagus nerve. Have you heard of that?
Vagus nerve, yeah. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
heard of
it's
it.
getting
I'm not super expert on it, so
it's
I've heard of
become
people talking about stimulating their vagus nerve and different methodology for that. So tell us about it.
well, the vagus nerve is that major nerve highway between our brain and our gut. So this is the one of the main mechanisms between which our gut and our brain or our nervous system are connected. And I think the term vagus nerve is becoming more and more popular, which is so cool. But literally, that apple cider vinegar shot I told you about is triggering your vagus nerve. It's sending you into rest and digest mode. That's all the
What are we
vagus
talking
nerve
about?
does.
How does apple cider vinegar have to do with nerves?
So
I'm
because
gonna grill you on this.
So I see it as like it's like this the vagus nerve is that anxiety off switch. It's helping your body to when we stimulate it, you are switching your body from fight or flight mode into rest and digest mode. So if we can any of those practices that trigger the vagus nerve are helping your body to relax, helping your body to get into that calmer state. How does apple cider vinegar do it? Well, because that bitter taste, so it's not a dose dependent response that you get here. You could even do it with a drop of apple cider vinegar.
Okay.
But again, it's going to make you salivate. And if you're salivating, you're in that digestive mode. You are ready to digest food. So you've activated that digestive system. Anything that makes you salivate is going to calm you down and have you in that more parasympathetic mode.
Okay. Interesting. How then does this feed into your work? How do you work with clients or patients with this stuff?
So I teach people like we basically work through a 4 month process of working through adding week by week different practices to address these elements of our resilience so that we're building our overall shield to life stress. But equally at the same time, we're looking at what those programs are in the subconscious mind that have led to the anxiety that they're experiencing now. I've never met one person who and I've met lots of different like scenarios from people. Some people are like, I had a great childhood. There's no issue. There's no reason why I would have anxiety from anything I went through in my childhood. And then there'll be people who are like, oh no, I've definitely got stuff. I don't really want to go there. So it varies. But I would have been one of the people myself who would have said for a long time, like, I had a great childhood. And that's still true. However, there are these little moments of things that happen, and it's so much more subtle than we realize, where some kind of emotional distress occurs. And just think, like, you see a little kid now, like, how many times a day do they start crying and they're upset about something? That emotional distress occurs, and if it occurs without a resolution, then it can live on in the body and it starts to become this stored stress. And we don't kind of move on from it, it stays as a chronic stress. And usually with children, or like if I explore this with a client, we'll go back to something as simple. I'll give you like an example. Someone goes back to a memory, they're 4 years old and they're sitting in the living room playing with their toys. And then all of a sudden they look around and mum's not there. Where's mum gone? Don't know where she's gone. No. And then they start thinking, I'm left. I've been left. I'm alone, and it's really scary. But maybe mum's just gone out to the clothesline.
Mm-hmm.
But from there, this fear of mum leaving can start to generate. And then mum comes back and there is a resolution, but maybe mum doesn't really attend to the fact that the child was so distressed. Maybe she's just like, well, it's just out of the clothesline. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
What are you worried about? But the kid is thinking,
Dismisses it.
yes.
Dismisses the experience.
So then we get these thoughts of, well, there's something wrong with me because why did I get so upset? And I'm being told that I shouldn't have been so upset. So these are how these programs start to develop. And then later in life, we have an adult who thinks there's something wrong with them, doubts their own experience, thinks that when I'm upset about something, I just have to kind of push it down or tolerate it because it's a me problem. And this is how we get people who stay, for example, in a workplace where they've got a really scary and possibly abusive boss or a team member around them that is truly making their life a living hell, like being a bully to them, and they stay in it and they think it's my anxiety problem rather than actually moving themselves to a safer environment because recognizing, no, this anxiety I'm feeling in this scenario is legitimate and I get to move myself away from it now.
I mean, the example you gave is relatively benign. There's a lot of people who have actual chronic experiences of being neglected or abandoned, and which form the conditioning and the worldview that, and a consistent kind of fear and anxiety that I'm about to get abandoned uh, at any turn, at any moment. And so that then leads to a certain set of behavior patterns to prevent the abandonment of whoever they care about, whether it's a job or a relationship or their spouse or whatever that is. And so then you start behaving in ways to prevent the thing that isn't a clear and present danger. There may not be objective evidence that you're about to be abandoned, but you still, out of the fear of it and the anxiety of it, you expect it to occur. So you start acting out in ways that are unnecessary, and that could lead to like the cycle of, let's call it, unproductive outcomes.
Yes, yes, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm going to be left, so then we act in ways that push people away, or create that outcome for ourselves, and then we just prove it true and true to ourselves over and over again. I the thing is, it's very clear when there's those obvious examples. I'm fascinated by the subtle ones because it helps to wake people up. There's so much we don't know that we don't know. If you're
Mm.
experiencing anxiety now as an adult, or you notice these patterns, or you don't trust people, or you don't trust yourself, or you think your emotions are too much, or you're too sensitive, there is a good reason for that. You don't know what it is. And I don't know what it is when I work with a client until we go and explore and we see what's there. So my work is in how can we stop creating that self-fulfilling prophecy and actually upgrade that childlike understanding of the world that maybe was programmed in when you were 5 or when you were 3 because something happened. And then we can say, well, mum just went out to the clothesline. She does love you and you weren't alone and she was coming back. And but what you felt in that moment was valid. You were only, how old did I say? 4. You were only 4 years old. Of course, that's valid for a 4-year-old. You needed your parent there for every single need, for your survival needs. If they're gone or they're not emotionally available, that's threatening your survival. So that's valid. But you're not that 4-year-old anymore. And if you were in a living room now as let's say you're a 35-year-old playing with your phone and your mum walked out to the clothesline, would you be scared now? And we start to show that younger version that things are very different now. We upgrade that understanding and we can break those limiting beliefs. And this is what can create a real permanent shift for people. And it's so exciting to be able to offer that to people.
Yeah, and to realize that, hey, I can be the source of meeting my own needs. I think a lot of what we are afraid of being abandoned, and I think because I went through this experience once myself, I sat down and did it. It wasn't exactly an intellectual exercise, but it was more of an experiential one where I went into something had driven me. it was a relationship situation that had driven my anxiety up, and I felt kind of anxiously attached, and I felt like I was going to be abandoned and rejected. And so I went into the kind of core of that and literally laid on my bedroom floor and kind of went into, just embraced the fear of it and just let it wash over me, just to explore kind of what that was going to be, what the root of it was. And ultimately kind of like take it back, and you take it back and you go into kind of an infant mindset, and realizing that you are totally dependent on this other being to come. You're going to cry out, and this person is going to come and meet your needs, whether it's hunger or safety or coldness or whatever that is. And then that sort of call and response, expecting a response from another person, kind of continues on. And I realized that, like, okay, so at the root of this is anxiety. It's like a call out for help, a call out to meet my needs. And what if I then, as an adult, recognize myself as the source of getting my needs met, and have a secure attachment and a secure relationship as like, hey, if I'm aware of what my needs are, I can go and fulfill my own needs. I don't need another person to kind of be there to do it for me. And then that sort of, it's not like a one-time thing for me. It was like experience by experience by experience. You got to reinforce it and show up for yourself and meet those needs time and time again, until you start getting more securely attached to yourself versus some external party.
Yes,
I think
that's
the
it.
flip of that is true for people that are more, I'm not super expert on attachment theory, but the flip of that is true for people that are more kind of dismissive avoidant, is like they over rely on themselves to meet all their needs, and they kind of push away others. And so perhaps the opposite of that is true, is like getting into an interrelationship, interdependent relationship, and starting to rely on others to show up for you in different ways, which leads to kind of like the trust issue, what you were talking about.
It's interesting because the root of the trauma for both extremes is actually the same thing. I need something and I'm scared I can't get it. And I'm not getting it in some way. Or, like, maybe you do get it sometimes, but what if you don't get it all the time? So, like, in my case, in my experience, like, both my parents were around and I grew up with them both, but my dad was very busy. So he was inconsistently available. He was sometimes there, but sometimes not. And also, when he was there, it was only for like 5 minutes and then he's got to go and do something else. So that was traumatic in its own way, to use a big word that we don't usually attribute to something like that, which is such a common scenario. So both scenarios, we've got a need for usually some kind of connection, love, that we're not getting consistently enough. And then that's a very scary, like, literally, I might die scary
Yeah.
experience for a child to
Yeah.
have. So yes, as we grow up, it's learning that in the more anxiously attached space, yes, bringing the focus back to self and not self-abandoning to get the resources and get what we need. But even that, Amir, there's a degree of speaking up for what you need and asking for it from someone else, which is such a scary thing to do
Just
because,
verbalizing it instead of just crying out and acting out and expecting others to show up for you, but
yeah,
actually having enough awareness to be able to articulate it and
yeah,
communicate
like,
it.
if you're in a relationship and it's like, I need more physical affection, we're not just going to like be like, okay, I'll just hug myself. Of course you can do that, but you
It's
can
not the
also
same. It just isn't the same.
like, we do need others. And I think that's one of the scariest things with the whole attachment theory and the fears and things that come up around that, which I believe is much, much more of a pervasive and common issue than is typically talked about. I think the statistics are like 50% of people are securely attached. I just, who are these people? I don't know them.
Yeah. They're not on this channel. They're not watching this video.
No, no. So it's such a big thing. And yet, yeah, we do need to sort of have that interaction with others. But it's been, when we can verbalize it, when we can ask what we need, it's, yeah, we feel so much safer. It's like, I can get what I need now.
Trust is an interesting one too. You brought up trust a little bit earlier. And I always think when I hear people talking about trust, I kind of want to say, like, look, some people view trust as kind of this blanket thing. I trust this person or I don't trust this person. But there's so many different variations of trust. And I might trust somebody in one area of life, but not in another area. Like I might trust one of my friends for emotional support, but I wouldn't go to them to help me balance my budget. I might trust another person to um, I don't know, watch after my home, but I wouldn't trust them for some other area of life. So I think trust as a blanket term requires so much more of a nuanced kind of approach to looking at. Can you kind of dig in a little bit about how you work with trust and what that means to you in the context of your work?
Yeah. So first thing that people often don't consider is when they're struggling to trust someone. And it's funny. I even have clients that are new to working with me, and they don't fully trust me yet, which is natural if they've had a reason to not trust people. And it's really beautiful over time to sort of like create that trusting relationship and be able to give them a new experience of that. But what is usually at the core of a trust issue with others is actually a lack of self trust. And what self trust can be damaged in those very, very subtle ways, such as dismissing a child's emotional experience and saying, "You're fine. What are you upset about? Grow up. Come on. This is not a big deal." Well, it's a big deal to them. So they will start to go, "Oh, it's not a big deal, but it feels so big inside me. I can't trust what I'm feeling because everyone outside me is telling me that I'm feeling something wrong." And that child may well be responding to noticing that mom and dad, like, they're not very connected, and dad's not giving a lot of affection to mom, and it's weird. And but everyone's telling me it's normal, so I'm not allowed to feel anything about this, and I've just got to smile and be happy. So we have very strong innate instincts that are built in when we're young, and children are so perceptive, but often that gets kind of, and this isn't a deliberate thing, but with good intention, often it's like, just be happy. Come on, here's a lollipop, smile. We don't want to see our loved ones in pain. We especially don't want to see our children in pain. But it does have consequences, and it can kind of cut them off from their natural instincts of trust. So a lot of the work comes back to reconnecting with that trust, so that in the scenarios you were talking about, like, who do I trust to help me with this problem? You can connect with what feels right to you and what feels wrong to you. When we're looking for someone that we can trust in a relationship, for example, if we're trusting of ourselves and our instincts, when something feels off, we can trust that. But if we're not connected to that and we're like, something feels off, but we're like, no, no, it's everything's fine, we will end up often in relationships with people who are not healthy for us, and create again that sense that I can't trust people. But it's because we've severed our own sense of really being able to recognize. Our nervous systems are so smart. We know when we're with someone who is not able to meet our needs, when we're with someone who is detached emotionally or unavailable or pulling away. We can feel all of that lack of safety. But if it's really familiar, we'll just dive into it anyway. So that's a really, really key one. If we can trust ourselves, then we can trust where to place our trust, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. And it becomes easier to
absolutely.
trust people.
You trust your own judgment as to where your trust is deserved and where it isn't.
That's it.
And then it kind of comes back to what you were saying around high performing people in the workplace and not taking time off. There may be a trust issue there of either having enough trust in yourself to establish healthy boundaries, or to trust that if you did take time off, that the organization would be in a good enough place to function without you for a period of time, or that you won't lose your job or whatever that is. So there may be trust issues there. I mean, there may be some legitimate things that you need to put in place. Obviously, you don't want to just leave and vacate and neglect your responsibilities. But I think in some of those cases, or in many of those cases, maybe it would be okay to take time off, but you just don't trust that things will be okay without you.
Yes, that's it. And I mean, if we've built a team that we trust, and we've built, and we even like having, there's so much we can do with AI and automation these days too, to have things running, even though we're not there present, we can sort of generate this sense of trust. But again, it's going to be hard to trust that or trust life, because we will project our own experience that we grew up with as children and the caregivers that we had and how much we could trust them. We project out onto life in the universe. So if our caregivers were constantly breaking our trust and betraying our trust because, hey, I trusted you to protect me, or I trusted you to care about me or give me attention or be present with me, and you're not, like, you're just on your screen, or you're just, you're too busy all the time, or whatever it is, we project that out onto the universe, and then we're like, well, it's going to be the same thing again. So as we again can resolve some of that stuff, it's going to be easier to trust life on a bigger level too. And it's not like, I don't, unless you're enlightened, we don't ever get to that place of I 100% trust in the unknown. But we can certainly clear a lot of our blockages and make it easier to lean into that space.
Aren't we all enlightened by now? Like, I think I'm done. I think I'm totally enlightened. Like, story is done. There's nothing, no more struggle. All the wrinkles of my personality have been ironed out. I don't think it ever gets fully done.
No, it's never fully done. And when you think it's done, the universe will be like, okay, here's
Here's another
another
one.
here's another like rug pulled from under you moment. But the more I used to feel really betrayed by life because when I was 19, my parents divorced and my dad left my mom, and it was a very like earth shattering moment. And I felt so betrayed by life. Like, how could you do this to me? This is not the way it was meant to be. And yet, you know, these experiences, like if that sort of experience happened to me again, and it has in ways, like there are certain other experiences I've had since then, every time you learn how you cope with it and you learn that you can cope with it, and then it's easier the next time the rug's pulled from under you to get through that scenario. So the first time is always a lot more challenging. Just like when we're children, the first time we have a big wave of emotion, or the first few times, the first few years, it's so scary. Will this ever end? Am I ever going to stop crying? Is my heart ever going to stop hurting? But as we mature and become older, and especially if we're learning to embrace our emotional experiences, we learn, oh yeah, it's just like a rain cloud passing through. The rain
So
always ends.
how did you and how should you cope with a situation like that where somebody seemingly pulls a rug out from under you and you're left kind of devastated in the result of it? How do you then navigate that in terms of creating a narrative where that person wronged you and is the devil and is super evil versus some other way of coping with the situation that may be more empowering? So what's that journey like?
Well, anyone that's actually listening to this conversation that's currently moving through something like that, I would say milk it. Milk it for your growth. There is going to be so much growth for you in this experience, and it's shitty. It is not fun. So you might as well
Okay, how
make.
do you milk? What are you talking about milking it? You're saying like get as much as you can out of that person, put a guilt trip on them, and say you screwed me and da da da, or like what are you saying here?
Get as much as you can out of yourself.
Out of the
Learn as much as
experience
you
of it.
can.
Okay.
Because you will see your attachment wounds are going to come up. You are going to see where you are relying on others to meet your needs and like one person to meet your needs. And you will be able to liberate and free yourself from so much because of these experiences. And you can frame it as a story, which I think is always helpful. This is your moment of the ashes where you've like, it feels like everything's bad and you've died and it's terrible, but you're going to rise like a phoenix through this. And if you set that as your intention and you seek out the resources to make that happen, whether it's working with coaches, healers, therapists, people who can help you, you are going to rise. There is no other way. We live in this expanding universe. We are wired for growth. We don't go backwards. So you will go forward through
So
this and
what's the
become.
opportunity? The opportunity is that this devastating experience can reveal your wounds that were already there and they'll come up to the surface for healing.
That's it, and free you, and you'll be able to free yourself from it. And there is a term in psychology called post-traumatic growth. So as we go through, we always hear about post-traumatic stress, like we get stuck in it, and oh no, like if you're in a war zone, if you get in a car accident or something like that happens, you're like, it's pretty bad, like you're gonna be stuck like that for the rest of your life. No, we can resolve our traumas and create resolution for them and grow through them. Those who have been through challenging experiences, I mean, like I've already talked about a couple, shared, you've been through stuff too. Like that's what builds us up as people. And like I was saying before, then the next time a devastating challenge comes in life, because it's coming, like for all of us at some point, we're going to lose someone we love. Like that's inevitable because no one lives forever. So when that inevitably happens, we are going to feel so much more resourceful within ourselves to navigate that challenge, to feel that
Yeah.
grief, because
Yeah.
it's we can ride those waves of that emotion as they move through us. We can process it in a way of knowing that the as we go through grief, for example, there are waves of it, and there are these moments where you get a break as well. And so as long as we keep feeling it, we're going to keep growing through it as well.
So, what I'm hearing you say is that there's the resiliency part and the practices and tools at your disposal to increase your capacity. And part of that resiliency is your ability to process difficult and challenging and traumatic experiences so that they'll, A, you kind of build that muscle and you are have greater resourcefulness to deal with the next one, and B, so that you break old conditioned patterns so that when, let's call it a similar or another traumatic or devastating experience happens, you can approach it from a way that could actually be positive or beneficial rather than being devastated and broken about it.
Yeah, like you're still going to feel the pain, but suffering is optional. And
Yeah.
the suffering is where we like really like wallow in it, and we're like, we're just like seeing it through the eyes of that 4-year-old that's like, Mom's gone out to the clothesline, like Mom's left me. It's like we don't have to stay in that level of suffering. These are
Yeah.
things that we can shift through and move through. But
And I
you know,
imagine
and
a lot of people are staying in abusive relationships, abusive work scenarios, and they perceive their situation as unsolvable because they're afraid of what else. They're afraid that another option might not exist, when in fact they may have other options, but they perceive it as, I need to stay here and suffer through it.
yeah,
So we're not
that's one way.
necessarily recommending to like cut and run in any situation, but to expand your perspective and see what other options might be available
Yeah,
rather than
for
staying
sure.
put.
For sure. Well, it's all a pattern and we can break the pattern. But we're so hardwired to grow and heal ourselves that we will subconsciously, unconsciously choose, say, a partner that mimics just what we experienced as children growing up. Like we'll just like walk straight into that. That's the one that we feel the spark with, the passion. We're like, yes. And isn't it amazing how by design life does this so that we will heal, so that we will see these parts of ourselves? And either, yes, we stay in the pattern and we still think we're 5 years old and we've got no choice, which is kind of like there's this 5-year-old part of us, or however old it is, or we become more conscious and aware. And that's where we can start to, yeah, make choices to better ourselves, which is where life gets really exciting.
Whew, that's a lot. So, as a therapist, I guess you primarily work with people one on one, and you've gotten into the retreat side of group programming. Tell us about your retreats and your experience with retreats, and kind of what you're up to in the retreat space.
Well, I have an online program, but it's so beautiful to offer something in person for people, and I love it so much to be able to create that space and an offering for people who, you know, they never normally would take 4 or 5 days to just focus on themselves and immerse themselves into a space like this. And when we do that, my earlier retreat in the year was in Bali. We called it Into the Cocoon because it's literally like that. We're like little caterpillars and we're like, I'm ready to transform. So let's go into this space where there is no judgment, where you will be loved no matter what you share, no matter what you say, where you are surrounded by other women who are on the same journey as you, and you feel seen, you feel heard. It's not like regular life where we all have our masks up and we're pretending everything's fine or what's socially acceptable here. It's like, no, how do you actually feel? And it's so, so beautiful and healing for people to go through that. And so I've got one coming up in Byron it's called Into the Earth, which is much more of we're grounding ourselves and dropping that stress and that anxiety, and we're burying it into the earth. All the old self, we're letting go of that, moving through a process over 5 days. And part of the work involves working through and journeying through our subconscious mind and finding those stories, those experiences from when we were young that are still hijacking us and we're experiencing over and over in our lives now, creating suffering, so that we can go and shift those programs and break them and create new ones. And I think there's nothing like a circuit breaker like that you cannot leave this retreat and feel like the same person. Like there are going to be insights and awarenesses that are divulged and come to the surface and are released as well, that you can't go into in any other setting. I mean, often in our typical therapy model, for example, we have these 50-minute sessions and it's like you're just getting to the juice and then time's up. Whereas 5 days, whoa, like we can go so deep. And there's so
And there's
much we
something
can.
about it, like those online programs are amazing. I love online programs. I love one-on-one sessions. There's something about being in that group format where you have the safety of the other group members. You get to hear the other people's experiences. You're going through it together, and there's this that camaraderie of, I'm a guy, so I'm going to interpret things through battle and war analogies. But it's like you're in the trenches with other people, and you build those bonds, which creates an additional layer of safety. As you see them open up, it gives you permission to open up and go deeper into your own experience. And like you said, there's no clock, right? So you don't have to end the session at 50 minutes or whatever.
Exactly.
So what, like, you've done a few of these group retreats, I know. What is like an example of someone, while maintaining confidentiality and privacy, like what's an example of someone that came through that you gives you particular joy, having seen them, the transformation that they had in your retreat?
Oh, just thinking about them makes my like heart explode. But one particular woman came to Bali and she was like, it was the first time she'd ever traveled by herself and she was on her own. And most people do attend these retreats on their own. But she turned up and she did it. And even just getting there was such an accomplishment. But one of the big things for her was sort of not feeling comfortable in her body and feeling this sense of always having experienced being an outsider in her life and not really getting that deeper connection. And one night we did, without giving too much away, we had this what I call it, this heart opening ceremony, where as when we just got to sort of immerse in this experience of love and creating it all together, which is a deeper sense of connection and bond that most people have never even actually experienced with their own families. Because hey, we sit down for dinner and we got the TV on, and don't talk about that. Whenever I try to bring like a gratitude or something to my family dinner table, it's like, shut
There's
up,
Georgie
Georgie.
again. There's Georgie again.
That's it. Like it's not embraced, unfortunately. And we just all, like, everyone's heart was open, and this one girl in particular was crying because she said, I've never in my life felt so much safety and connection with other people before. I've never felt seen like this. And for her, that was so healing. And by the end, she was showing up in photographs. Like she used to never get in front of the camera. She was just dancing in her body and just feeling so much more free. And to be able to create those kind of experiences for people is stunning. And everyone will have their own journey. Everyone gets what they need out of the experience. But that's just one example. And I love that we get to be there so we do, each day is different. Each day is an incremental shift. And then we're living and breathing this work at the same time. We're eating the foods that nourish our body. We're taking the apple cider vinegar. We're doing the breathing and all the things that, it's like once you've set those habits into motion, then when you go home, it's so much easier to like weave that stuff into your life and maintain it. Because I don't want anyone coming to my retreat and kind of going, okay, well, that was great to be in that little fantasy for 5 days, but now I'm back to real life and that's all gone. It's like, this is coming with you. Like, you will not go back to who you were before.
I think when I have these kinds of experiences, part of what it does is shows me or gives me a window into how else life can be. And it resets my expectations so that when I do come back into life, regular life as it's called, my tolerance levels for BS change. And I'm like, okay, well, no, I know how good I could feel. And so this situation that's not giving that experience needs to change. And I'm going to now make different decisions and place different expectations on my regular life, because our life and our relationships are sort of have been architected and the dynamics are in play. So when you do come back into life, at times there needs to be adjustments because you've now opened up, you've learned how else life can be. And so now those dynamics on occasion need to be renegotiated.
100%. We don't use the term life changing lightly. You totally remind me of another girl who, she had a trip for
Hold on.
three.
I identify as a male. Another girl in your retreats. Okay. Okay.
Yes,
I thought
sorry,
you said
another
that.
girl on my
I
retreat.
remind you of a woman. Okay. Go ahead.
Your experience reminds me of
On the same
one of the
page.
women from my retreat who, she had planned another 3 days of time with a group of friends after the retreat. And she she got there and she was like, I don't want to be a part of this. Everyone's wanting to party and be on a different vibe. And she's like, I was just so connected on such a deep level that was so nourishing. She ended up going home 2 days early, not in a like a negative way, but just I actually want to honor my energy and who I am. And so, yeah, things really do shift.
Relationships shift. Some people leave. Some new relationships form to meet you where you are now.
That's it. 100%.
Amazing. Awesome. Georgie, we are going to post links to your website and to the retreats below this, wherever this is going to be published on YouTube and social media. I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to present your teachings and your work to our audience. So thank you very much for that.
Thank
I
you.
hope that people do check you out and check out. You've got retreats. You run retreats in this sort of oceanic. What is it called? What's the region called? Is it Australia and Oceania
Yeah.
region?
Yeah.
Kind of the kind of
Australasia.
Bali. We're like we've got Bali. We've got Byron Bay. Do you do any North America retreats?
No, but I'm possibly going to plan one in New Zealand as well. So then
New
that covers
Zealand.
definitely this area.
Okay, amazing. So North America people should consider flying over, especially in the winter. If Georgie's got one going, make it a holiday, make it a transformational holiday with purpose. So rather than going and sitting on the beach and drinking mai tais or whatever or pina coladas, go have a transformational experience. And it might be worth the journey to go to Australia and New Zealand because they're pretty awesome places.
It is such a special place.
Awesome. Georgie, thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording here and we'll stay on and chat a little bit more. So thanks for your time.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Bye bye.